My name is Amber Evie, and I'm a grant specialist at Maddie's Fund. And we're really excited to be hosting the third huddle for the We Foster Challenge. So as you know, starting on May 1st, we are encouraging shelter and rescue groups to expand or create community-based foster programs. And so far, we have 353 organizations signed up to participate and 16 national organizations as partners. We are awarding $210,000 in grants to participants who complete the participation reports, and we can't wait to see the results. Today, just like our other huddles, we're going to have 40 minutes of presentation time and then time for your live Q&A. So everyone is muted, but you are welcome to keep yourselves muted, but go ahead and ask questions in the chat. If it's something that's timely, we'll go ahead and let our speakers answer those questions. Otherwise, at the end, we'll go back and we'll catch the questions that we didn't get to. So today we're talking about foster programs that strive to keep pets and people together. And we got a little behind the scenes talk between Kristen and Tracy. So I'm really excited to hear what they're going to tell us about today. So today we have Kristina, Executive Director for Ruff Haven Crisis Sheltering. Kristina leads the social work service efforts at Ruff Haven Crisis Sheltering. She is a licensed social worker who has worked in various social service organizations in Salt Lake City for over 20 years. She, along with 3 other friends, started Ruff Haven in 2020 after serving vulnerable pet owners while volunteering for animal welfare organizations. She is a strong proponent of using trauma-informed approach. She believes that animal welfare is human welfare, and so do we, Kristina. So we're super excited to have you here. And we're also excited to welcome Tracy Brad, the Executive Director from Beck's Place. Tracy decided to channel her grief of losing her beloved dog, Jack, who she adopted while recovering from her own broken back, and he had been recovering from a car accident, into a positive change for her community. She studied social sciences, earning a BA with a minor in anthropology at the University of Washington, and her master's of science in primate behavior at Central Washington University. Her postgraduate diploma in journalism at London School of Journalism, and a certificate in animal behavior and welfare from the University of Edinburgh, and a certificate in dog emotion and cognition from Duke University. All of this within 14 years. And if you want to hear more about her story with Jack, there is a film titled Tracy and Jack that was created by Mutual Rescue Initiative, which I encourage everyone to check out Mutual Rescue Initiative if you haven't already. Tracy was the co-owner and co-publisher of Pet Connection magazine, and she co-founded a multimedia television campaign, Limelight Pet Project. Tracy is also the author of her first book, Dog Behavior, Modern Science and Our Canine Companions. So we're really excited to hear from Tracy and Kristina today. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over. Tracy, it looks like you're unmuted. Did you want to start?
Sure, I can start. So our presentation is about fostering to keep families together. So I think a lot of the time when you think of fostering, you think of fostering an animal for an organization where the goal of the foster is to help them become adopted. And both Beck's Place and Ruff Haven operate on a slightly different model. We foster owned pets. And so what's different about that is that these foster situations are just to help families get through a temporary crisis. And then the goal is for the animal to go back to their family. I don't know if you had anything to add to the intro part of it, Christina.
Yeah, so we're based in Salt Lake City. We're a fairly new organization. We are all volunteer. I am a volunteer. And so, we just want to let everyone know. I know sometimes when we get through these, it's like, oh, these are big shelters doing this, and how do we do it? But we've been able to do it as well. And our organization operates out of a boarding facility. One of our co-founders owns that. And then we, once we kind of got our feet under us with that, then we did start opening up to foster homes. So we utilize both. As well, and we opened in the middle of the pandemic, and so it's just been a baptism by fire. But yeah. So.
And what's really neat for us is seeing how well Ruff Haven operates, and on a slightly different model from ours. Having a boarding facility is such a smart idea. We don't have a boarding facility, but we do have boarding partners who can step in and help us. And we also, Christina and I will talk about a recent case that we worked on where we actually had an animal shelter step up and house some animals temporarily. And Beck's place is located in Monroe, Washington, which is north of Seattle. So I think we're ready for the next. Yeah. Yes. So recruitment. How do people learn about Beck's place? Well, through social media and influencers. We use volunteer platforms such as Volunteer Match. Both of our programs really rely heavily upon volunteers to step up and be foster homes. We get a lot of traffic from our website and from email lists. One of the biggest areas that we receive information and people hear about us is word of mouth. Prior clients who have decided that they would also like to become foster homes, or friends of friends hear about the program. Fostering organizations like this are so rare. There was another one in Washington State that was wonderful and also provided emergency foster boarding. They unfortunately didn't make it through the pandemic. So when people hear about an organization like this that can step in and provide this emergency foster boarding, that spreads quite a bit via word of mouth. I've also used Nextdoor quite a bit to get the word out and to get more volunteers to be foster homes, media releases. Pre-COVID, Beck's did a lot of events and a lot of community action programs where they would be out in the community, either at pet events or things like farmers markets with a booth, and just explaining the need that we have for more foster homes and telling people that we are a resource in the community. And then outreach through community partners. A lot of who reaches out to us, it's social workers, law enforcement, and it's just getting the word out that we are a resource and that we do network with different organizations to help provide that safety net for our community. And then we've also gotten a little bit of traction with Good Home through Greater Good Charities. They try to help find good potential foster homes for all programs, not just programs like ours, but for all animal rescues.
Hey, so I'm going to talk a little bit about messaging. I do believe we've got actually our two foster coordinators on the call too. Beth just put in the chat. So if you guys do have any questions, she's happy to answer as well. But some of the messaging that we use, because obviously this is very, very different than traditional fostering. And so we use a lot of like support pet families just like you. I think that resonates with people who like, what am I going to be doing? You know, what would I do if I were in a similar situation? I don't have friends or family. We talk a lot about preventing shelter and rescue intake, especially right now with kind of like the shelter crisis. This is a way to keep them out of the shelter, and you are part of the solution to animal welfare. So we receive detailed information about pets. So that's a way to market this as well. None of these are strays. They aren't coming off of unknown histories. So we have a pretty detailed application that we are able to fill out, like what their likes are, what their things are, and then we just shoot them all of that information over to the foster so that they can see that as well, leaving out detailed information, like the details about the family. Because we do have a boarding facility, and I know Beck's Place also has some partners through boarding. We allow travel, vacations through boarding. So we're always like, if you guys need to leave, if you need to travel, that's great. Just let us know. And then, you know, so there's not some of that like, well, I'm going to go on vacation for a week. What am I going to do? I can't foster. So we can let you. We have a firefighter that was one of our first fosters, and he was declined everywhere else because he's on for 2 days and he's off for 4. And so that was a difficult schedule, but we were still able to kind of accommodate that and work with him because we have that boarding. We are very low barrier. Anyone can foster. We don't require Facebook. We've gotten fosters that are declined from other groups because they have to have a Facebook account. That's the only way they communicate. So we have a lot of senior fosters as well who maybe aren't technology savvy. There's no profiles to write, adoption events, vet appointment. This is like a big sticking point for one of long-term fosters that we've had, is that she's like, I love it. I can just take pictures. I'm not responsible for any other things other than that. So for her, that's a really great ceiling point. We, of course, provide all supplies, food, whatever anyone needs. We do use the Maddie's Fund app, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from our fosters that they do enjoy that. They find that really helpful, and then we can respond to any situations that we're seeing. And then we just also have very accessible foster coordinators that we've got two. We've got one that kind of monitors cats, one that monitors dogs, and they are very able to responsive. They're very responsive and accessible.
So how do families in need find us? A lot of the time when we receive a call or an email, people are in the middle of a crisis. They're very stressed. They're either escaping a domestic violence situation. They've recently lost their housing. I've gotten calls from people where you can hear the hospital equipment beeping in the background. It's just heartbreaking. So how do you know who to reach out to and how during a situation like this? And again, one of the big ways is word of mouth. Prior clients, friends of clients, just word getting out in the community. A lot of the time, homeless people will contact us because they've heard through their friends that we are a potential resource for them. Social media is another big source for people to be able to reach out to us and see if we are able to help them provide that with that emergency foster boarding while they find housing, or seek substance abuse treatment, or go to a hospital stay, things like that. We do get a lot of calls from case managers and social workers, law enforcement, nurses. I received a call from a nurse a few months back, and it turned out that the cat didn't need assistance, but I was just so glad that this nurse thought to call when this patient was taken in, because it was clear that the patient was going to be in the hospital long term, and this person's only concern, even though their health was really, they were in really rough shape, their biggest concern was who's going to take care of my cat. And a recommendation that I've had to a lot of the local hospitals is to maybe include that in their intake process when they're taking patients in. Do you have a pet at home who might need some care? So that's a conversation that I've had with some of the nurses and doctors that have reached out to me. And then domestic violence advocates reach out as well, trying to find out if we have placement for them to be able to take in their animals so that their people can escape the situation and then be reunified. We also get a lot of leads from animal rescue organizations and shelters. We partner with, one of our partners is Everett Animal Shelter, which I cannot speak highly enough of them. We had a recent case where, again, word of mouth, an acquaintance of mine reached out to me and said, there is a domestic violence situation, and it's in your county, and the person has 2 dogs, and they've fled from the situation, and they're trying to figure out, what to do with their dogs. And so they had fled from Snohomish County, and I asked this person, where are they now? And he said they're in Utah. And that was the best possible thing he could have said to me, because I knew Roughhaven was in Utah. And so Roughhaven stepped up big time, and they were able to help get these dogs from Snohomish County all the way down to Utah, where this family with young children had fled a very dangerous and violent situation. And Everett Animal Shelter has a special program where if a DV advocate reaches out to them, they can shelter pets for a short amount of time just to get them out of that dangerous situation, and then eventually help get them reunified with their family. So it was a really satisfying outcome to what could have been a really tragic situation, since the DV perpetrator was threatening violence against the dogs. So it was that word of mouth, somebody thought to reach out. And then fortunately, because of Maddie's fund, I knew of Roughhaven, and we were able to, connect those dots. And then families also find us through our websites and through Google. And so there's multiple ways that they can reach out and find out about us and figure out, oh, hi, Lindsay, figure out how they can, see if there's some support available.
Yeah, so that was, the dogs came to us yesterday. We've got them, we're in touch with the family, and we're working on reunifying them. They're about 4 hours south of us. So we're just trying to figure that situation out. And something that actually our organization just did this year is we partnered with our Humane Society of Utah. We have an MOU with them actually. So they provide all of our spay and neuters for free for us for up to a certain amount. And we just got legislation passed to include pets in protective orders. So Utah is now the 37th state in the country to do that. So that was very, very exciting. And we're just kind of moving through that process as well with that. So yeah, and there's some great questions here as well. So again, we're all volunteers. I think Tracy is a paid staff member. The rest of her team are volunteers as well. We care for about 55 animals at a time. So that's usually what our capacity is. And I know Tracy's Beck's place is a bit smaller as well. Okay, so some foster management that we have. So we do have an application. We use Shelter Love, so that goes through Shelter Love, and then they come through us. So all of our animals for us come to the boarding facility first, and then we kind of assess, and then we move out into foster homes. We do have some animals that we required to have a foster lined up before we can accept them, and that's we really try with seniors. They decline so quickly in boarding, as well as puppies. We typically will not take puppies. We're really trying to save our spots for people who've had their pets for an extensive period of time, and that would be really unable to rehome. But domestic violence, sex trafficking, human trafficking, we will take any of their animals. So, and then we will carefully match them with the foster or the boarding facility. So, and then a program manager or coordinator checks in with foster homes at least once a week and receives updates, including photos and video. Again, Maddie's app used as well. We use Facebook, email, text, whatever situation, so that we can get photos and things like that. And then they also check in with each client once a week with updates and photos of our program. So we have about an 89% return to owner rate. And then we also have other metrics that we consider for successful outcomes, which includes private rehoming and some other things as well. So basically for us, if the owner is involved in the decision, whatever that may be, that is a successful outcome for us. There's no one collecting this kind of data, and there's not like this, shelter animals count, live release rate kind of stuff happening. And so we've just been kind of led up to make our own decisions, and that's what our board decided. So our clients have to check in once a week. That is the only requirement. It's all free. We provide medical. We don't have any other barriers. As long as you check in, we even send a text reminder, whereas we want to make the families as successful as possible to be able to reunify with their animals. And then we coordinate visits, vet appointments, so that's what the fosters do too, and then they can just drop off and we can take, or we have volunteers or the fosters can take. So again, we just try to make it as accessible as possible with that. And then this is our cute Reunification. That was a domestic violence. That's Scout and Ia, her service animal, and they testified actually for this bill and are doing great. So she and her mom, and they were living in the local family shelter as well. Okay, let's make sure I go. There we go.
So because our programs both work with owned animals, we have some definite do's and don'ts that we have to follow. Christina works in social work, and I'm also a licensed foster parent. And there are a lot of parallels between our work and the foster care system in terms of confidentiality. You don't share information. A lot of the time, when I'm talking about a client, I will use very generic language, such as client or family. I will use they, them pronouns, unless the client has specifically told me that they want information to be given out. But even then, I will only, share things like gender, nothing that will actually make it possible for them to identify and piece together, the owner and the animal. We also ensure that anybody in the organization has signed confidentiality agreements and that they are aware that this is confidential information. Things like being unhoused or needing to seek substance abuse treatment or being hospitalized. These are very personal, private things that shouldn't be shared unless it's after reunification and the client is okay with that being shared because it is a positive and happy outcome. And so each situation is case by case. Some people never want that information shared, and that's fine too. We have a program manager who is the go-between between the foster family and the client. We never have foster families and clients interact directly. And that's very similar to the foster care system as well. I don't know if you could hear in the background, I am currently fostering a human newborn, and she was screaming as I'm sure my husband was putting a sweater on her, but he was getting her ready for her biological parental visitation, and the visit supervisor was coming to come pick her up. So it's a very similar situation where you have a person in between to, again, maintain that confidentiality between the foster family and between the client. And we, when there are visits, we haven't really been doing visitation because of COVID, but when there is visitation, we would have the leadership facilitate it rather than the foster family stepping in again, so that there would be that level of separation. Where we make an exception is if the foster family wants to participate in reunification. They don't always want to, and again, it's not always appropriate, but that is the one place where we would make an exception. So some of the things that we don't do, we don't share any identifying information at all. We want people to know that when they're reaching out to our organizations, that we will be treating them with discretion and kindness and grace, and that this isn't something that's going to be public, and that this is a resource that they can reach out to privately and know that we will be discreet for them. And we don't share any posts or photos on social media or elsewhere without their explicit consent and permission. We do have release forms signed, but we always check in with families after the fact as well, because sometimes people change their minds, and sometimes when they're applying, they're like, yes, I agree to everything, just please help me. And then after reunification, they have more time to think about it when they're not in that crisis situation, and they think, I actually don't want that. And that's perfectly fine. We understand that a lot of the work that we do, it's kind of a moving target, and people are moving in and out of situations that are bringing them closer to stability. And so we want to always respect that and honor that, and let them know that we are discreet and we absolutely will maintain their privacy and confidentiality.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, agreed. We have a very lengthy consent form for photos as well, videos. They do not, we make it very clear this is not a requirement. You're not required to share this. But then we also have some families that are like, absolutely, my dogs are the cutest dogs you've ever seen, and we want everyone to see them. And, and are just really happy to share their story, especially like the reunification part, because they're really proud of the work that they've done and the real challenges that they've overcome. So, it's just like Tracy put it exactly, it's a moving target. So you just have to want to check in with them, and we won't share any domestic violence unless they explicitly say, like for Scout and Ia in that situation, we just did like a photo day with a photographer for families, because most families that, are experiencing financial challenges never get to have family photos with their pets. So that was just something that we provided. And then we said, you guys don't have to share this. They're like, absolutely, we want to use these pictures. So, and they understand too that, they want to be able to do that. I just saw Jenna's comment about clients participate. So for us, we have almost no barriers, because I am a social worker. I'm able to screen pretty well. We don't have income limits, zip codes. I know Tracy's has some zip code limitations and stuff like that. We do require spay and neuter. So unless it's like a medical or a senior, that is just a non-negotiable for us. We cannot have animals that are unaltered out in a boarding facility, right, with a bunch of other animals and things like that. And especially if we're going to provide a lot of like holistic, we're providing vaccines and medical and stuff like that, then, the easiest way to prevent pyometra, we've actually caught several pyometra cases and stuff like that, spay and neuter. So that is our one negotiable. It's paid for. And we do have definitely people that will decline our services because of that. And that's okay. So,
we do as well. Yeah. And the parameters for Beck's Place are 501c3 covers low income residents of Snohomish County. But like Kristina said, we do require spay and neuter, and we do have some partners that we work with to help us provide that. And then if the animals need vaccine updates, we're able to do that as well. And we typically like to, if the animal's not microchipped, we like to microchip them as well.
Yeah, we can
just in case the animal, goes missing.
Okay. All right, so reunification. So basically, this also could be a moving target, scheduled when client indicates they're ready to reunify. So this sometimes, and Beth and Caitlin can attest to this, our foster coordinators will have someone get out of the hospital and they're like, hey, I need to come get my animal right now. And it's like, oh, okay. So we ask usually for about 24 hours notice, and that usually provides enough time for the foster to be able to drop off. If they're at our facility already, that's very easy for us to manage, but we do, and sometimes we'll have people like leave treatment suddenly against device. It's just fine. We're on no judgment. Come get your animal, but we just need to communicate with that. So we do reunification, can take place at a neutral place, park. Again, it always happens at our boarding facility or in the client's new residence, which means like me or my partner, Marissa, it's the two of us that kind of run the day-to-day operations. We'll maybe go and have to take an animal to their home, like to their new home, or, if it was a hospitalization or a senior, they don't have transportation, kind of a thing. The foster parent can be invited to participate when appropriate. This goes back to really knowing your fosters as well as your clients. There are definitely going to be times when that's not going to be appropriate, but others it may be. So, we ask them not to share information. We did have like a situation where we didn't realize that like a foster had left a note or something with their contact information, and then the owner, who was experiencing dementia and some stuff like that, kind of freaked out about something and reached out to them, and then they were freaking out, and it was like, it all worked out okay, and we were able to communicate and everything well, but those are just the situations that we really want to avoid. And so and really fosters aren't trained to handle, but we're trained to be able to handle those situations as well. So for us, we have like even like a little pet report card, kind of like they went to daycare kind of a thing, where you can just put like, hey, these are their friends in their foster home, or this is their behaviors that we saw. And that's really nice. And again, a lot of pictures, we send those updates. It's really important for that. Again, obtain consent for photos and use of story again, and then send foster family photos too. So if, like we take a photo at reunification, we like to send the foster family that photo, so then they can see, look, it's, they're great and everything, they're home and all of that. And that helps them kind of, feel that sort of satisfaction of knowing what they're doing. All right.
I've been watching some of the comments and questions, so this slide will address quite a few of those, but please let me know if there are any that haven't been addressed. So with this work come a lot of challenges. One of them is obtaining weekly updates and pictures. Christina and I have talked about how sometimes one of the fosters, they'll be a great foster family, but they just, they'll send you a text update, but they won't necessarily send a lot of photos. And so sometimes what we'll do is we'll kind of dole those photos out over time, because we understand how important it is for the family to receive regular photos. So even if we received all of those photos, maybe at the beginning of April, we'll kind of spread them out so that they can keep seeing more, because a lot of the time foster families, they're really busy. They have jobs and fostering is something that they're doing in their spare time. So it can be hard to get weekly updates and pictures. Some of our fosters are great and do it without prompting, but some of them, they need a reminder, and we'll just check in and say, hey, how's everything going? Do you have any questions? Any support that you need? Length of stay is a big one. So we have an absolute upper limit of 9 months. We have a client who is going to be hitting that within about a week. So they have it's like 8 months and 3 weeks where they'll be getting their pet in June. And that's a stay that's been, put out because again, this work is so much of a moving target, and they've been having a hard time finding appropriate housing where they can have their animals with them again. A lot of the time fosters do want to know more details about the family. They'll make assumptions about the owner, and we just don't correct them. We don't, give out any information that the client would want us to give out. There's typically minimal opportunity for adoption. We did have a situation with one client who her health didn't allow her to be able to be reunified with their pets. She realized that she was going to be in and out of hospice care probably for the rest of her life. And it was a heartbreaking decision for her. One of the cats was adopted by a member of the foster family, and the other cat is being adopted out through Perfect Pals, which is a wonderful organization in our community. And so when we have situations like that where reunification isn't possible, adoption is offered to the foster family first. But again, there is minimal opportunities for that. Fosters may never receive updates. That can be really hard to have an animal in your care for weeks or months, and then they're reunified with their person, and then you never hear about that animal again. And I've been a foster for quite a few animals myself, and I always want to know how they're doing. So that can be really hard for the foster families to realize that they might never hear about how that animal is doing again. We hope that they will, but that's always the possibility. Clients are also, they'll be concerned about the care that their pets are receiving while we have them. They'll want to make sure that they're getting the right food and that they're not stressed out. And some of the animals that we're taking in have behavioral issues, or they're stressed, or they have, some minor health issues. And so we have a cat right now who is being treated for, we think that it's a combination of anxiety and probably some kind of an allergy. And so her family just wants to make sure that she's doing okay. There are liability concerns. I won't get into all of the details, but there was a 3-day period of my life where a foster that I had taken in managed to, and take note of this, people, that cats can do this. I didn't know they could do this. This cat had taken off the cover of my register and climbed into my ductwork and decided that that's where she was going to live for eternity. And so I called everybody that I could think of. Unfortunately, I didn't reach out to Christina because she's like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that kind of a situation. But it was, and my board president was very sick with COVID, so it was just me trying to figure out how to get this cat out of my floor. We called HVAC, exterminators, law enforcement, you name it. We ended up cutting my floor apart to get this cat out, and taking her to the veterinary office, and she is now fine. My floor, not so much, but what's important is that she's okay. But yeah, there is a huge liability concern, and there's a high level of responsibility with somebody else's cat. But you just have to keep in mind that a lot of these cats and dogs are coming from situations of trauma. Their people have been stressed for a very long amount of time. And a lot of the time that transfers to the pets, because their pets are their constant companions. And you're getting these animals that are suddenly thrown into a novel situation. And this cat thought, what I need to do is just hide. And the only place that she could think of to hide was in my register. So her current foster home is a home where the registers are, they are part of the wall. And unless she gets a little kitty screwdriver, she can't take the register off and get in there. So that was something that we had to keep in mind. But yes, a lot of liability concerns and a high level of responsibility, because these are animals that are owned and loved by other families.
Yeah, cats, man. We were not cat people before we started, and we so underestimated the need for cat fosters and like the cats. We thought it was just going to be like all these large dogs and things like that. And so, we really had to kind of like adjust, and Marissa, who owns our boarding facility, like cleared out a room so we could put kennels, and we could, and now we have that set up. But we've certainly had the cats up in the ductwork situation and try to figure out how long we can go before we, and we found we've had a couple and we found both of them, but one of them we finally ended up telling the owner, and then she felt bad, like, oh my gosh, and we felt terrible, and then she felt terrible because she's like, I'm so sorry that they're, and then we were able to kind of work with her about getting some tips of like what to do and stuff like that. So it was great. So yeah, so the minimal opportunity for adoption, I would say we probably have about 8% of our clients that are not able to reunify. So we talk to them always about, we will private rehoming. Let's talk about that. We just created a private rehoming page on our website that we launched about 6-7 weeks ago. And so, you know, we'll try to, we want them to be involved in that. It's kind of a mutual agreement between them. We'll use a rehoming contract. And most of the time, you know, they will take up on that. Sometimes it may result in like a shelter surrender if we feel like that's the best, but as long as they're the ones who, you know, agree to that. And again, because we have such a strong partnership with all of the Best Friends is here, we've got Humane Society, you know, our local municipal shelter. We're able to just navigate that pretty easily. And then we do get clients that just kind of ghost us, and that happens fairly rarely. I would say we've seen that actually a little bit more recently, but that seems to follow what we're just seeing in animal welfare, of like this explosion, right, of you know, people not being able to keep their pets. And I honestly just think a lot of that's like a coping response, that they just don't want to know what's going to happen, and they can just not, you know that their animal's okay and hope that they're safe. So that happens. It's okay.
Yeah, we're currently dealing with a situation like that where the owner was highly communicative until 1 week before they were supposed to get their animal. And I understand it's a moving target. I don't expect somebody to, you know, adhere to that date exactly. But it's been long enough now that, you know, warnings have been sent out, and we do need to have some communication. You have to, you know, keep us updated and let us know. So unfortunately, we probably will have to end up rehoming this animal because we haven't heard back from the owner for so long. And that's not the goal of our program. But again, like Kristina was saying, that is a side effect of people in crisis, and maybe not wanting to be a part of that process if they realize during the foster process that they won't be able to have their animal back. They figure it's easier for them to just walk away and have somebody that has signed up to take care of that animal figured out. And it looks like the question about who would take the animal has been answered.
Yeah. So right. So we do like a 60 days, kind of what we start with. We can extend for 90. We will extend. We've extended to 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Honestly, it just really depends on the situation. As long as we get that weekly check-in, that is what keeps their slot in the program, and that's what we say. So we are providing a completely free service. You know, so that's the only thing that we require. And so if you know they forget, we'll send a reminder. Again, we send a reminder text too, that already on top of it. You know, but if they you know, kind of fall off, we'll reach out to emergency contacts. We'll, you know, do all of that kind of stuff. So what we operate on is a 7-day notice when we finally get to that point where we're like, you've got 7 days to come and pick up. And I just want to say too, like when we first started the process, we reached out to Lost Our Home in Arizona, that they also have a robust temporary sheltering program, and their executive director met with me and was so kind and gave us some of their documents. So we've kind of modeled ours off of theirs as well. And yeah, and so then once we get to that point, then we will go ahead and just move forward. So we really make every single attempt to reach that family. And I always say that we always straddle that line of human welfare and animal welfare. And sometimes the animal welfare is going to take precedence. And in those situations, when we've had an animal just sitting with us, we want to get them now into a home that is going to be their next stage of their life. So, you know, and that's just life. Again, I've been doing social work for a really long time, and we just cannot, you know, that's just, people make choices in their life, and sometimes it involves their animals. So, okay, I think we've got like one. Oh yeah, so that was our last slide. Here's our contact information. I saw something about putting like the report card. I'm happy to share any of our documents into the chat or into the message board today. If you guys have any questions and stuff, I can upload some of our documents. We do have a very robust contract, and that we go over with our clients. Everything is electronic. We've created everything on Jotform too. So if they're in the hospital or something, we can just shoot that over. We do try to have in-person intakes as well, just to go over everything in detail and whatnot. So Steve, we've never had an issue with a foster not returning the pet. And so, yeah, we were actually talking about this when we were meeting for this with our foster team, which is that we've been very, very fortunate to have amazing fosters that are like cream of the crop. And I wholly give props to our 2 foster coordinators who do one-on-one individual orientations with them and really go through a lot of the procedures and so forth. And so, yeah, we've never had an issue with that. Josh, our funding is, we did receive a PetSmart grant last year, which was amazing. So that helps us actually pay for boarding costs for our organization, and then everything else is privately funded, and donations and so forth. So.
Yeah, and we're similar. We've gotten some small grants. We've applied for some larger grants through the city of Monroe, and then just a lot of support from donors.
Wow, thank you, Christina and Tracy. That was so much great information. And then thank you for the Ruff Haven folks on the chat who are answering the questions too. Usually Wendy and I are like slacking back and forth trying to like make sure the questions all get answered. So it's like we need to have you back to answer the questions for our other huddles too. That is awesome. And then also too, I hope Christina and Tracy, you got to see some of the love that you were getting in the chat too about your partnership and the good work that you're doing. So I did just want to go back through, and I'm going to go up to the beginning of the chat and just kind of make sure that we've covered all the questions, and then I see some more stuff popping up, so that's great. But I did want to touch onto this one that Brittany asked towards the beginning, and Christina, you talked about it a little bit, and I think you both covered it with spay neuter. But if someone is having trouble caring for their pet financially, but they're in a safe space where they don't need to surrender their pet, but they might need to because they can't afford a medical condition or like, dog food or something like that, do you help those folks with the supplemental costs? So again, they have a safe space to live and care for the animal, but they might need help with the other costs. Do you do anything for that?
We have a pet food bank, and in the past, we have had pay what you can veterinary clinics. Unfortunately, COVID hit us pretty hard for funding opportunities like that, since we do assume all costs for pets who are in our foster boarding program, but that is something that we hope to be able to do again. But we have a pet food bank. We partner with other organizations, and we refer people out to other organizations that might be able to provide some support as well.
Yeah, and we, if you guys are working with anyone that's like unsheltered in your community, homelessness, temporary care, I want to give a huge shout out to Pets of the Homeless. They have an amazing, amazing medical fund. And so if we get contacted by people from our local homeless shelters or things like that for medical, we will shoot over to them information, and they usually will cover medical for that. So we don't have the ability to do, as you guys are well aware, medical could bankrupt you in 10 days, right, of whatnot. And so we aren't able to provide it. If we will work with the Humane Society, other partners, and just kind of assess the situation. That's something that we would love to do, especially like for senior pets is a little bit more of that. We do a lot of work with the unsheltered community. We have some volunteer vets and stuff as we kind of continue to grow our organization as well. So, but if they come into our program, then we'll go ahead and provide medical, acute medical, right? So, and we have had pets die in care, and that is really hard, and that's really sad. And we just had a dog pass away a few weeks ago. We actually ended up getting a necropsy because these are owned pets, right? And he had underlying long-term lung issues going on. So, some of these animals may have never seen a vet. They haven't seen them in 10 years. So this is something that we talk to them. I mean, I've lost my own dogs to cancers, right? And things that we really talk to the owners about, because that is like our worst fear is having animals that we're caring for other people get sick and so forth. So I've seen some questions about recruitment. We did actually pull some stats of where we're getting the most, and a large part actually is also Google. So we have a volunteer that runs a Google ad grant for us that I was able to find like pretty early on. So don't underestimate just web searches and Google to get fosters for that. So it's really interesting that we've had that, a lot of word of mouth, some things like that. So Josh, yeah, we can send that information over. And I know, gosh, I cannot remember the executive director's name off the top of my head, but I know she's posted in the Maddie's forum actually recently, because they do have, if you go to their website, there's like a phone number that the client can call directly. And they sometimes will just take you just show us like a picture. If you're living in a tent, that shows us that you're homeless and that'll qualify. So very low barrier for that kind of a thing. So, but we really try to fit that pet retention space in our community. We have one other organization outside of Park City that does only domestic violence for us. And then we kind of fill in the rest of the gaps.
Mhm.
And you both did a really great job about letting us know how you find your fosters. And I think like never underestimate the power of an old fashioned flyer that is just up somewhere. It's like, do you want to help animals? And you're like, I do. And then you see it and then, goes from there. But I do think my friend Sarah Rosenberg, hi, Sarah, is on this call. And she asked kind of a follow-up question to this. What about keeping the fosters? Because I mean, Christina, you've worked in social work. Tracy, you've been a foster parent yourself. And like, it's super duper taxing and stressful and emotional and all the things. So if someone goes through and they, successfully do a reunification or the animal gets adopted out or whatever happens, how do you keep those foster parents to say, oh, I do want to do this again? How do you retain them once you've recruited them?
Sometimes they do need to take a little bit of a break afterward. But for the most part, unless the foster has adopted the animal that was in their care and they literally don't have more room for it, we haven't really had that much of an issue with retaining them. What we have found is sometimes they will want pretty much exactly the same kind of animal that they'd fostered before because they form such an attachment to them. So that makes it a little bit harder to get a placement for them. So we have somebody right now who's specifically waiting just for, a very small, older male senior dog. So when we get a client that has that, that'll be the first person that I call. But that's totally understandable since they formed an attachment to that specific foster pet that they had.
Yeah, and I think same thing. It's just, and something that we found with this, and you're going to find, you guys know this with fostering too, is that foster may not be the right fit for your organization. This is a very different kind of fostering, and we have just found that other people are like, no, this is too hard. Like, I can think of a foster that we had who was a very experienced foster for another organization who just had a hard time not getting information about the owner and or what was happening at the visit or where they were going to, or all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, I try to be as like trauma informed as possible, and I still have judgments, and I've taken animals in, and if I knew that my foster that I had was going back into a car, which we will reunify into cars, into homeless shelters, that kind of a thing, that would be really hard. Right. And so that's why we kind of don't talk about a lot of that information. And so, you may find that this is not the right fit, and then you can just refer to other great organizations who everyone needs fosters right now, and see something that's going to be a better fit for them and for us, and just kind of, go from there. Yeah, exactly. But they have a point about embracing your mission. Again, Beth and Caitlin for us do a really great job about being very, very, very clear about what our mission is and what this entails. And, some of those challenges of, we had a recent foster that has fallen in love with her dog, and she's just like, if they can't reunify, let me know. If you can't reunify, let me know. And it, that's great, but that's not our goal. And that's not, if we get to a point where we feel like this is becoming a barrier, we would probably pull that animal out of that foster home. We just can't have that kind of like feeling, or the families feeling like they are not doing what they're supposed to, or they're not going to get their animal back. So we actually have one of our former clients from last year who reunified. Her picture was in there, who's now a board member. She is amazing. She's young, and she, I'm very big on lived experience to help us. And we'll have her reach out to people who are nervous about that fact. That will be like, so kind of like a peer support a little bit of, am I going to get my animal back? What's it like? We can have her reach out and say, yeah, this is the experience, and so that they won't worry about that. So we just have to be really careful that we don't, risk that sort of relationship that we have.
So I have one. I know there's more questions in the chat, but I just really want to like uplift and highlight what you just said, Kristina. So you have a member of your board who was previously a client where this person could not keep her animal, came to you and said, "Help me for whatever reason." You helped her, and now this is someone who's on your board.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
She's
yeah,
wonderful, and she is like she actually testified as well. She was a victim of abuse and domestic violence, and our Bill Lexi, and she is probably one of our most valuable board members. I mean, you can talk about funding, connections, money, things like that, but no one else is going to be able to speak to our mission probably better than she can. And so yeah, she's wonderful.
Have more of an empathy and a judgment free, because we can talk about that all day long, but like, we're all human and we all, have that. But when you've lived that experience, it's a little bit easier to put yourself in the shoes of someone else who's lived it.
Right.
Yeah.
One of our former board members was also a prior client as well. So I love, Christina, that you have a current board member that was a client. It really does add to the organization, and it shows people that the program works.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think this just kind of programming is really different, right? It's a lot of human case management. So just be prepared. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys are doing these kind of work as well. I highly, highly recommend that whoever you have doing these kind of owner programs you guys have some sort of LinkedIn with social services, social work, has some type of background, because it's hard. And I, again, have had a lot of experience with this. I work in the criminal justice system, actually, with adults in administration now. So I'm in the weeds every day with people who, quote unquote, are not good people. And yet I still love this. This is my passion. And I innately believe that people are good, and that these are people who need a lot of support, and they're lovely. Most of our clients are just lovely people that are, and we highlight that these are animal welfare heroes too, right? So it's not just us, it's not just the volunteers, the transporters, the shelter workers, the clients keeping their animals out of shelters are animal welfare heroes. So, we really, that's why we try to share their stories as well.
I absolutely love that. And I feel like I always use as an example, because I mean, I've been in this field for almost 20 years, which makes me feel really old, but it's true. And it used to be, and I will admit that I was a person who bought into this philosophy and, kind of did things to spread it, which was like, oh, you can't keep your animal, you're a bad person, you're not a good pet owner, we'll take the animal from you. And now I've seen it in my time change to, oh, you can't keep your animal for whatever the reason, how can we help you? And then once you get reunified, let's put you on our board so we can figure out. I mean, that to me is just like, when you see change in your lifetime, is amazing. I was gonna ask a really question about programming, and but now I'm just like, wow. It's like Beth says, did I just get the warm fuzzies? Yes, Beth, thank you, we did. It kind of threw me off. That is so amazing. But I did just want to highlight one more very basic programming question before we close. And I think, Kristina, you touched on this, and Tracy, you touched on this as well, but I just wanted to double check. So Kristina, you're doing the text check-ins, and how long is it before you get, before someone goes dark on you, before you get ghosted by one of your clients, before you say, okay, we need to rehome this animal or find
Yeah,
out?
so if we don't hear from someone within that week check-in period, we'll always follow up immediately, right? Like next day, hey, we didn't hear from you, what's going on? If we don't hear about a week after, then we'll probably reach out to their emergency contact. And then if we don't get any contact, that's when we're going to issue a 7-day notice, is probably. So we're looking at probably a 2-week gap of time before we really start kind of giving that notice. And sometimes that's what sort of triggers them to kind of get back in contact, right? And it just basically says you've got 7 days to pick up your pet. If you don't, pick them up within that time frame, they basically become our property for adoption. And they sign that. That's very clear up at the front too, this whole process and whatnot. So That's what we do. Again, that communication, we can work with anything else. We've had clients reach out to us like on Facebook, which I'm always super impressed by, like the fact that they make all of these different efforts that maybe you wouldn't think of to stay in touch. I'm, when they go above and beyond or have someone else do that, I'm always, that always warms my heart. I'm like, okay, they're here.
And as long as they're maintaining those weekly check-ins, you keep the animal for indefinitely, or do you have
Yeah, so if we don't see progress being made, or we're coming up, like we had like a gentleman who had his cat with us who was living in one of the local shelters, which does allow animals, so which is amazing. And so it kind of had been like 4 or 5 months, and we're just like, you haven't made any housing progress. Let's hook you up and give you like the Cadillac kennel of what you can have for your cat. Let's put them back with you. And we just saw them a couple of weeks ago, and amazing. Like that cat is the happiest cat they've ever been with his person. The owner were scared about it, but and so he was like, you're right, it is time and we appreciate you. So we do have to sometimes push, and we may get to a point with us where we just say, we've got a waiting list. It's, if things are not going to change in the near future, what would that look like, right? What's going to change? And if it's not, then we need to address that, and we will. I kind of have rigid boundaries within, like, we make individualized choices, but we've got a lot of people in need. We're getting 15 to 20 applications a week. So we just kind of have to,
keep it going. Yeah. And Tracy, you had mentioned a case that you have for going on 9 months. Is that regular?
That's not typical. This client has pushed out their reunification date multiple times. And the most recent one, they said, a June date. And I said, that's going to have to be the absolute latest, because that's bumping up against the 9-month mark. And so pointing that out to them got them to give me the exact day and even the approximate time of day that they would like to be reunified, because they have housing set up and they're moving forward with that. But it's not typical that we would do 9 months, but we've had 5, 6, 7-month stays. But again, as long as we're seeing progress, because we can't take a client in unless we know that there's a goal for reunification and that they are working towards stability, whether that's substance abuse treatment or, seeking employment or finding appropriate housing.
Awesome. Well, I think we did a really good job of covering everyone's questions in the chat. So with Caitlin and Beth on as well. So thank you, Caitlin and Beth, for being behind the scenes and answering the questions in their chat. Definitely want to encourage everyone to head over to Maddie's Pet Forum, as I usually do, to keep the conversation going. And so you can get like a copy of the contract or the report card or any of the other great resources that Christina and Tracy have to share. Thank you both so much for joining us. This really I always leave with warm fuzzies after I talk to animal welfare folks in any capacity, because we're always doing great things. But I really, really appreciate you both, Christina and Tracy, showing us the change that we've made, and it's truly inspiring to me. I can't wait to see what everyone does with their We Foster reports too. I won't be here next week, but I really hope we have another great last huddle with Gina and the crew. So we'll see everyone next Wednesday at 11. Thank you to everyone for joining us today, and please stay safe and have a great rest of your week. Take good care, everyone.